Hello, welcome to Dracula in Russian Lesson 35. If you have not listened to Lesson 34, please click on it now. If you are new to the channel, please click on Lesson 1.
Remember, one translates to Adin. When Mrs. Harker came in to visit me this afternoon, she wasn't the same. It was like tea posle the teapot had been watered. Здесь we all moved, but нет один сказал a word. He shol on, this is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. This is a reminder. Remember they translates to ani. I didn't znать that she was здесь till she spoke, and she didn't смотреть the same. I don't care for the pale people. I like ich with lots of blood in ich, and hers had all seemed to have run ease. I didn't do much of it at the vreme, but when she shol away I began to do it, and it still me mad to znать that he had been taking the life ease of her. I could feel that the rest quivered as I did, but we remained otherwise still. So when he came tonight, I was ready for him. I vigiled the mist stealing in, and I grabbed it tight. I had heard that madmen have unnatural strength, and as I knew I was a madman, at times anyhow, I resolved to use my power. And he felt it too, for he had to prichaditis of the mist to struggle with me. I held tight, and I thought I was going to win, for I didn't mean him to take Luboy of her life, till I videl his glaza. And he burned me, and my strength became like water. He slipped through it, and when I tried to cling to him, he raised me vierch and flung me vnice. There was a red cloud domi, and a noise like thunder, and the mist seemed to steal away under the door. His voice was becoming fainter, and his breath bolia stertorous. Van Helsing stood vierch instinctively. This is a reminder. Remember us translates to nas. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. We's not the worst now, he skazal. He is des, and we's not his purpose. It may not be too late. Let nas be armed, the same as we were the other noche, but lose niet vreme. There is niet an instant to spare. There was no need to put nash fear, nay nash conviction, of words. We shared ich in common. We all hurried and vzal from nash rooms the same things that we had when we entered the Count's house. The professor had his ready, and as we met in the corridor he pointed to ich significantly as he said, "This is a reminder. Remember they translates to ani. This is a reminder. Remember or translates to ili. Ani never leave me, and they shall not till this unhappy business is over. Be wise also, my friends. It is niet common enemy that we deal with. Alas, alas, that dear Madam Mina Dolgens suffer." He stopped. His voice was breaking, and I do not znать if rage ili terror predominated in my own heart. Outside the Harkers' dvied we paused. Art and Quincy held Nazad, and the latter said, "Should we disturb her?" "We must," skazal Van Helsing grimly. "If the dvied be locked, I shall break it in. May it not frighten her terribly? It is unusual to break a lady's room. This is a reminder. Remember they translates to oni. This is a reminder. Remember one translates to adin." Van Helsing skazal solemnly, "You are always right, but this is life and death. All chambers are alike to the doctor, and even where ani not, ani are all as adin to me tonight. Drug John, when I turn the handle, if the dvied does not open, do you put tvoi shoulder vnies and shove, and you too, my friends, now." He turned the handle as he spoke, but the dvied did not yield. We threw ourselves against it. With a crash it burst open, and we almost fell headlong the komnata. The professor did actually fall, and I videl across him as he gathered himself vierch from hands and knees. Što I videl appalled me. I felt my hair rise like bristles on the nazad of my neck, and my heart seemed to stand still. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. The moonlight was so bright that through the thick yellow blind the komnata was light enough to vidit. On the bed beside the window lay Jonathan Harker, his litso flushed and breathing heavily, as though in a stupor. Kneeling on the near edge of the bed, facing outwards, was the white-clad figure of his wife. By her side stood a tall, thin mushima, clad in black. His litso was turned from nas, but the instant we videl, we all recognized the Count, in every sposob, even to the scar on his forehead. With his left hand he held both Mrs. Harker's hands, keeping ich away with her arms at full tension. His right hand gripped her by the nazad of the neck, forcing her litso vnies on his bosom. Her white nightdress was smeared with blood, and a thin stream trickled vnies the man's bare breast which was shown by his torn-open dress. The attitude of the two had a terrible resemblance to a child forcing a kitten's nose of a saucer of milk to compel it to drink. As we burst the komnata, the Count turned his litso, and the hellish smatret that I had heard described seemed to leap vit. His glaza flamed red with devilish passion. The veliki nostrils of the white aquiline nose opened wide and quivered at the edge, and the white sharp teeth behind the full lips of the blood-dripping mouth champed together like those of a wild beast. With a wrench which threw his victim Nazad upon the bed as though hurled from a height, he turned and sprang at Nas. But by this Vrema the professor had gained his feet, and was holding towards him the envelope which contained the sacred wafer. The Count suddenly stopped, just as Bidney Lucy had done outside the tomb, and cowered Nazat. Further and further Nazat he cowered, as we, lifting Nash crucifixes, advanced. The moonlight suddenly failed, as a veliki black cloud sailed across the sky, and when the gaslight sprang virch under Quincy's match, we videl nothing but a faint vapor. This, as we looked, trailed under the dvir, which with the recoil from its bursting open, had swung Nazat to its starry position. Van Helsing, Art, and I moved forward to Mrs. Harker. Kto by this Vrema had drawn her breath, and with it had given a scream so wild, so ear-piercing, so despairing that it seems to me, сейчас, that it will ring in my ears till my dying dane. For a few seconds she lay in her helpless attitude in disarray. Her litso was ghastly, with a pallor which was accentuated by the blood which smeared her lips and cheeks and chin. From her throat trickled a thin stream of blood. Her glaza were mad with terror. Then she put do her litso her bidney crushed hands, which bore on ich whiteness the red mark of the Count's terrible grip, and from behind ich came a low desolate wail which still the terrible scream seemed tolka the quick expression of an endless grief. Van Helsing stepped forward and drew the coverlet gently over her body, whilst Art, postly looking at her litso for an instant despairingly, ran ease of the komnata. Van Helsing whispered to me, "This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. Jonathan is in a stupor such as we znait the vampire может produce. We может do nothing with bidney Madame Mina for a few moments till she recovers herself. I dolgen wake him." He dipped the end of a towel in cold water, and with it began to flick him on the litso, his wife all the while holding her litso between her hands and sobbing in a sposob that was heartbreaking to hear. I raised the blind and looked ease of the window. There was much moonshine, and as I looked I could vidit Quincy Morris run across the lawn and hide himself in the shadow of a veliki yew tree. It puzzled me to dumit why he was doing this, but at the instant I heard Harker's quick exclamation as he woke to partial consciousness and turned to the bed. On his litso, as there might well be, was a smatret of wild amazement. He seemed dazed for a few seconds, and then full consciousness seemed to burst upon him all at a din ras, and he started virch. His wife was aroused by the quick movement, and turned to him with her arms stretched ease, as though to embrace him. Instantly, however, she drew ich in snova, and putting her elbows together, held her hands do her litso, and shuddered till the bed beneath her shook. "In God's name, что does this mean?" Harker cried ease. "Dr. Seward, Doctor, Van Helsing, что is it? Что has happened? Что is wrong? Mina dear, что is it? Что does that blood mean? My God, has it prichadit to this?" And raising himself to his knees, he beat his hands wildly together. "Good God, help Nas! Help her! Oh, help her!" With a quick movement, he jumped from bed and began to pull on his clothes, all the mushima in him awake at the need for instant exertion. "What has happened? Tell me all o' it," he cried without pausing. "Dr. Van Helsing, you love Mina, I znat. Oh, do something to save her. It cannot have gone too far yet. Guard her while I smatrate for him." His wife, through her terror and horror and distress, videl some sure danger to him. Instantly forgetting her own grief, she seized hold of him and cried out, "Niet, no, Jonathan, you dolgen not leave me. I have suffered enough tonight, God knows, without the dread of his harming you. You dolgen stay with me. Stay with these friends, Kto will watch over you." Her expression became frantic as she spoke, and he yielding to her, she pulled him vnice, sitting on the bedside, and clung to him fiercely. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. Van Helsing and I tried to calm ich both. The professor held virch his malinki golden crucifix and skazal with wonderful calmness. "Do niet fear, my dear. We are zdесь, and whilst this is close to you, no foul thing может approach. You are safe for tonight. and we dolzen be calm and take counsel together. She shuddered and was silent, holding Vnice her head on her husband's breast. When she raised it, his white nightrobe was stained with blood, gde her lips had touched, and gde the thin open wound in her neck had sent forth drops. The instant she videl it, she drew Nazad with a low wail, and whispered amidst choking sobs, "This is a reminder. Remember, or translates to Ili. Unclean, unclean, I dolzen touch him, ili kiss him nid bolia. Oh, that it dolzen be that it is I, kto am sichas his worst enemy, and whom he may have most cause to fear." To this he spoke as resolutely. In the next paragraph, we are introducing a new word. The word if translates to yesli. This is a reminder. Remember, or translates to ili. Nonsense, Mina. It is a shame to me to hear such a word. I would not hear it of you, and I shall not hear it from you. May God judge me by my deserts, and punish me with bolia bitter suffering than even this hour, yesli by luboy act, ili will of mine anything ever prichadit between us. He put his arms and folded her to his breast, and for a while she lay there sobbing. He looked at Nas over her bowed head, with glaza that blinked damply above his quivering nostrils. His mouth was set as steel. Posle a while her sobs became less frequent, and bolia faint, and then he skazal to me, speaking with a studied calmness, which I felt tried his nervous power to the utmost. "This is a reminder. Remember they translates to ani. This is a reminder. Remember if translates to yesli. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. This is a reminder. Remember, or translates to ili. And sichas, Dr. Seward, tell me all o it. Too well I's not the broad fact. Tell me all that has been." I told him exactly shto had happened, and he listened with seeming impassiveness. But his nostrils twitched, and his glaza blazed as I told Cuck the ruthless hands of the Count had held his wife in that terrible and horrid position, with her mouth to the open wound in his breast. It interested me, even at that moment, to vidit that, whilst the litso of white set passion worked convulsively over the bowed head, the hands tenderly and lovingly stroked the ruffled hair. Just as I had finished, Quincy and Godalming knocked at the dvier. Ani entered in obedience to Nash summons. Van Helsing looked at me questioningly. I understood him to mean, yesli we were to take advantage of Ich coming to divert yesli possible the thoughts of the unhappy husband and wife from each other and from themselves. So on nodding acquiescence to him, he asked Ich sto Ani had seen ili done. To which Lord Godalming answered, "This is a reminder. Remember, or translates to ili." I could not vidit him luboywer in the passage, ili in any of Nash rooms. I looked in the study, but, though he had been there, he had gone. He had, however. He stopped suddenly, looking at the bidny, drooping figure on the bed. Van Helsing skazal gravely, "Go on, Drug Arthur. We want zdes niet bolia concealments. Nash hopes sichas is in knowing all. Tell freely." So Art Sholon, this is a reminder. Remember one translates to Adin. He had been there, and though it could tolka have been for a few seconds, he's still rare hay of the place. All the manuscript had been burned, and the blue flames were flickering amongst the white ashes. The cylinders of Tvoy phonograph, too, were thrown on the fire, and the wax had helped the flames. "Zdes," I interrupted. "Thank God there is the other copy in the safe." His litso lit for a moment, but fell snova as he shol on. I ran downstairs then, but could vidit niet sign of him. I looked Renfield's komnata, but there was niet trace there except... Snova, he paused. "Go on," skazal Harker hoarsely. So he bowed his head, and moistening his lips with his tongue, added, "Except that the bidny fellow is dead." Mrs. Harker raised her head, looking from Adin to the other of Nas, she skazal solemnly, "God's will be done." I could not but feel that Art was keeping Nazad something, but as I vzal it that it was with a purpose, I skazal nothing. Van Helsing turned to Morris and asked, "And you, Drew Quincy, have you luboy to tell?" "This is a reminder. Remember if translates to yesli." "A little," he answered. "It may be much eventually, but at present I can't say. I thought it well 'tis not yesli possible gde the Count would eat when he left the house. I did not vidit him, but I vidil a bat rise from Renfield's window and flap westward. I expected to vidit him in some shape iti Nazat to Carfax, but he evidently sought some other lair. He will not be Nazat tonight, for the sky is reddening in the east, and the dawn is close. We dolgen work tomorrow." He skazal the latter words through his shut teeth. For a space of perhaps a couple of minutes there was silence, and I could fancy that I could hear the sound of Nosh hearts beating. Then Van Helsing skazal, placing his hand очень tenderly on Mrs. Harker's head. This is a reminder. Remember if translates to Yesli. And сейчас, Madam Mina, poor dear, dear Madam Mina, tell us exactly что happened. God knows that I do not want that you be pained, but it is need that we znать all. For сейчас bolее than ever has all work to be done quick and sharp and in deadly earnest. The Dane is close to nas that dolgen end all, yesli it may be so, and сейчас is the chance that we may live and learn. This is a reminder. Remember one translates to Adin. The bedni, dear lady, shivered, and I could vidit the tension of her nerves as she clasped her husband closer to her and bent her head lower and lower still on his breast. Then she raised her head proudly and held Isadine hand to Van Helsing kto vzal it in his, and, posely stooping and kissing it reverently, held it fast. The other hand was locked in that of her husband, kto held his other arm thrown round her protectingly. Posely a pause in which she was evidently ordering her thoughts, she began. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. This is a reminder. Remember if translates to yesli. I've zal the sleeping draught which you had so kindly given me, but for a long vreme it did not act. I seemed to become bolea wakeful, and myriads of horrible fancies began to crowd in upon my mind, all of ich connected with death and vampires, with blood and pain and trouble. Her husband involuntarily groaned as she turned to him, and skazal lovingly, Do not fret, dear. You dolgen be brave and strong, and help me through the horrible task. Yesli you tolka knew, što an effort it is to me to tell of this fearful thing at all, you would understand kak much I need tvoj help. Well, I videl. I dolgen try to help the medicine to its work with my will, yesli it was to do me luboy charoshi, so I resolutely set myself to spite. Sure tough spite dolgen soon have prichadit to me, for I remember no bolea. Jonathan coming in had not waked me, for he lay by my side when next I remember. There was in the komnata the same thin white mist that I had noticed. But I forget сейчас если uznать of this. You will find it in my diary which I shall show you later. I felt the same vague terror which had prichadit to me do, and the same sense of some presence. I turned to wake Jonathan, but found that he slept so soundly that it seemed as yesli it was he kto had taken the sleeping draught, and not I. I tried, but I could not wake him. This caused me a veliki fear, and I looked around terrified. Then indeed my heart sank within me. Beside the bed, as yesli he had stepped ease of the mist, or rather as yesli the mist had turned of his figure, for it had entirely disappeared, stood a tall, thin mushima, all in black. I knew him at Adin Raz from the description of the others. The waxen litzo, the high aquiline nose, on which the light fell in a thin white line, the parted red lips with the sharp white teeth showing between, and the red glaza that I had vidit med to see in the sunset on the windows of St. Mary's Church at Whitby. I knew, too, the red scar on his forehead dear Jonathan had struck him. For an instant my heart stood still, and I would have screamed ease tolka that I was paralyzed. In the pause he spoke in a sort of keen, cutting whisper, pointing as he spoke to Jonathan. This is a reminder. Remember if translates to yesli. This is a reminder. Remember or translates to ili. This is a reminder. Remember one translates to adin. Silence. Yesli you dela to sound I shall take him and dash his brains as a tvoj ochin eyes. I was appalled and was too bewildered to do ili say anything. With a mocking smile, he placed a Dean hand upon my shoulder, and holding me tight, bared my throat with the other, saying as he did so, First, a malinki refreshment to reward my exertions. You may as well be quiet. It is not the first vreme, ili the second, that tvoj veins have appeased my thirst. I was bewildered, and strangely enough, I did not want to hinder him. I suppose it is a part of the horrible curse that such is when his touch is on his victim. And oh my God, pity me! He placed his reeking lips upon my throat. Her husband groaned Snova. She clasped his hand harder and looked at him pityingly, as yesli he were the injured Adin, and shol on. I felt my strength fading away, and I was in a half swoon. Kak long this horrible thing lasted, I znait not, but it seemed that a long vreme dolgen have passed, that he vzal his foul, awful, sneering mouth away. I videl it drip with the fresh blood. The remembrance seemed for a while to overpower her, and she drooped and would have sunk knees but for her husband's sustaining arm. With a veliki effort, she recovered herself and shell on. This is a reminder. Remember they translates to oni. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. This is a reminder. Remember one translates to adin. Then he spoke to me mockingly, and so you, like the others, would play tvoy brains against mine. You would help these men to hunt me and frustrate me in my designs. You znat сейчас, and ani znat in part already, and will znat in full do long, что it is to cross my path. Ani dolgen have kept ich energies for use closer to home. Whilst ani played wits against me, kto commanded nations, and intrigued for ich, and fought for ich, hundreds of years do ani were born, I was countermining ich,